I'm watching Britain face a threat that most people don't see and won't understand until it's too late. Not an invasion, not a conventional military attack, something more insidious. Britain's biggest strategic threat this decade isn't Russian tanks or Chinese warships. It's the systematic, relentless attack on the digital infrastructure that keeps this country functioning. Every hospital, every power station, every water treatment facility, every bank, all under constant assault. And right now, we're losing, not dramatically, quietly, one system at a time. The immediate risk is this. Britain experienced 90,000 separate cyber attacks last year alone. 90,000. Most trace back to state-sponsored actors: Russia, China, Iran, North Korea. They're targeting the national grid, water systems, hospitals, transport networks, financial infrastructure, everything that makes modern life possible. And here's what concerns me. These attacks are below the threshold for a military response. They don't trigger NATO Article 5. They don't justify retaliation. But they're cumulative. They're eroding Britain's resilience, testing our defences, and preparing the battlefield for something worse. Each attack maps our networks, identifies our vulnerabilities, and rehearses future operations. Put simply, if Russia or China wanted to cripple Britain without firing a shot, they could. Not today, not all at once, but the capability is being built, tested, and refined right now, and Britain's response is insufficient. We're defending when we should be deterring. We're reacting when we should be preventing. The gap between the threat and our capability is widening. That should concern everyone. So how did we get here? Britain built one of the most advanced digital economies in the world. Banking, healthcare, energy, transport, all dependent on interconnected systems. That connectivity created efficiency, productivity, and economic growth, but it also created vulnerability. Every system linked to the internet is a potential entry point. Every supply chain is a vector for compromise. Every dependency is a weakness adversaries can exploit. And Britain never built the defences to match the exposure. I'm tracking 3 critical failures. First, Britain prioritised economic growth over security. We allowed Chinese technology into our telecommunications networks. We outsourced critical infrastructure management to the lowest bidder. We accepted risk because the alternative was expensive. The political calculation was clear: voters reward economic performance, not invisible security investments. Second, we underestimated the threat. Cyber warfare was treated as a technical problem, not a strategic one. Intelligence agencies understood it. Politicians didn't. And by the time the government recognized the scale of the threat, adversaries had years of head start. Third, we failed to invest in offensive cyber capabilities. Defense is necessary, but without the ability to impose costs on adversaries, there's no deterrence. And without deterrence, attacks continue unchecked. The financial context makes this worse. Britain's National Cybersecurity Centre is effective but under-resourced. The budget for cyber defense is a fraction of what's needed. Meanwhile, Russia, China, Iran, and North Korea are investing heavily. They're recruiting hackers, developing malware, and building capability at scale. Britain is playing catch-up in a race where falling behind means catastrophic consequences. Now let's examine the actors. First, Russia. Russia wants to weaken Britain, divide NATO, and punish us for supporting Ukraine. Their leverage is hybrid warfare, cyber attacks, disinformation, sabotage. They use criminal proxies and hacktivist groups for plausible deniability. Their weakness is that their attacks are often noisy and detectable, but they're persistent, and persistence matters. Russia's targeting is specific: energy infrastructure, water systems, healthcare, local government. The goal isn't total collapse. It's disruption, fear, and erosion of public confidence. If Britons can't trust that the lights will stay on, that water will flow, that hospitals will function, then government credibility collapses, and that's a strategic win for Moscow. Second, China. China is more sophisticated and more patient. They're not looking for immediate disruption. They're conducting espionage, stealing intellectual property, mapping British networks, and positioning themselves for future leverage. Their weakness is that they need access to British markets, technology, and investment, but that's also their strength. Economic interdependence makes retaliation politically difficult. China's approach is systematic. They target universities, research institutions, defense contractors, and critical infrastructure operators. They steal data, recruit insiders, and compromise supply chains. The goal is long-term strategic advantage, and they're playing a game Britain hasn't yet fully recognized. Third, Iran. Iran's cyber capability has grown significantly. They're targeting British financial institutions, energy companies, and government systems. Their leverage is asymmetric warfare. They can't match Britain militarily, but they can impose costs through cyber operations. Their weakness is limited sophistication compared to Russia and China, but they're learning fast. Fourth, North Korea. North Korea uses cyber operations to generate revenue and conduct espionage. They disguise operatives as freelance IT workers, infiltrate British companies, and steal funds. Their weakness is isolation, but their desperation makes them unpredictable. Fifth, non-state actors. Hacktivist groups, criminal organizations, and ideologically motivated individuals are also targeting Britain. Some are proxies for state actors, others operate independently. The challenge is attribution. When an attack occurs, identifying the responsible party is difficult, and without attribution, accountability is impossible. This is where the leverage sits. Britain's entire economy depends on systems that are under constant attack. The national grid supplies power to 67 million people. A successful attack could cause blackouts lasting days or weeks. Water treatment facilities ensure clean drinking water. Compromise those systems, and public health is at risk. The NHS runs on digital infrastructure. Ransomware attacks have already disrupted hospitals. A coordinated assault could be catastrophic. Here's what I'm concerned about. Britain treats cyber threats as a technical issue for specialists. But this is a national security crisis. Most citizens don't understand the vulnerability. They assume someone is protecting them. That assumption is dangerous, because the reality is stark. Britain's defences are reactive. We detect attacks after they've penetrated systems. We respond after damage is done. We don't impose sufficient costs on attackers to deter future operations. The escalation risk works like this. Russia tests British defences with low-level attacks, distributed denial of service operations against local councils, probing attempts against energy networks. Each attack gathers intelligence about response times, defensive capabilities, and vulnerabilities. If Britain doesn't respond decisively, Russia escalates. A successful attack on a water treatment plant, a ransomware operation against hospitals, each incident below the threshold for military retaliation, but devastating for civilians affected. Meanwhile, China maps British networks. They identify choke points, backup systems, and dependencies. They don't attack, they position themselves. Because in a future crisis over Taiwan, over trade, over technology, China wants leverage, and the ability to disrupt British critical infrastructure provides exactly that. This matters for Britain because our entire post-industrial economy is digital. Finance, logistics, communications, energy, all dependent on systems that adversaries are actively targeting. If those systems fail, Britain doesn't just lose money. We lose the ability to function as a modern state. Food distribution breaks down, banking stops, communications fail, and social order becomes fragile. Now the situation becomes more serious. Britain lacks offensive cyber capability sufficient to deter adversaries. Intelligence agencies can conduct operations, but there's no systematic doctrine for imposing costs on hostile states conducting cyber warfare. Compare that to Russia and China. When they're attacked, they retaliate. When Britain is attacked, we issue statements and impose sanctions. That's not deterrence, that's theatre. Let me walk through 3 scenarios, each based on current trajectories and identifiable pressure points. Scenario 1. Escalating sub-threshold attacks. This is the most likely path. Russia, China, and Iran continue attacking British systems at levels below military response thresholds. Hospitals face ransomware. Energy networks experience disruptions. Financial institutions are targeted. Each attack causes damage but not catastrophic failure. The trigger is incremental. As British support for Ukraine continues, Russia intensifies operations. China escalates as UK-China relations deteriorate. Iran retaliates for sanctions. Britain responds with improved defences and limited offensive operations, but the attacks continue because the costs imposed on adversaries are insufficient. The outcome is erosion. Britain spends billions defending against attacks while adversaries spend millions conducting them. The economic asymmetry favours attackers. Over time, British systems become more resilient but also more expensive to maintain. Meanwhile, public confidence erodes. People lose trust in government's ability to protect them. Political pressure builds for accommodation with adversaries. Who wins? Russia achieves strategic weakening of a NATO member. China gains leverage. Iran demonstrates capability. Who loses? Britain's economy, public confidence, political stability. The indicators to watch are frequency of successful attacks, government cyber defense budgets, and public polling on national security confidence. Scenario 2. Major infrastructure failure. Britain experiences a catastrophic cyber attack that causes widespread disruption. The trigger could be a coordinated assault on multiple systems simultaneously. Power, water, communications, and transport all compromised within hours. The government declares a national emergency. Military and intelligence resources mobilize. International partners provide assistance. Britain identifies the responsible state actor, likely Russia or China, and demands immediate cessation, but the damage is done. Hospitals operate on backup power. Water supplies are contaminated. Banking systems are offline. Food distribution breaks down. Public panic is controlled but significant. Supermarkets are emptied. Cash withdrawals spike. Social media spreads disinformation. The government faces pressure to retaliate militarily, but escalation risks wider conflict. Britain instead conducts limited offensive cyber operations against the adversary. Diplomatic expulsions follow. Economic sanctions intensify. The outcome depends on duration. If systems are restored within days, Britain survives with credibility damaged but intact. If disruption lasts weeks, economic costs run into tens of billions. Political consequences are severe. Governments fall. Public demands accountability. Who wins? No one. Even the attacking state faces international condemnation and retaliation, but Russia or China might calculate that weakening Britain justifies the costs. Who loses? British citizens. The economy. International confidence in British resilience. The indicators to watch are sophistication of attacks, target selection, and government investment in resilience. Scenario 3. Effective deterrence established. Britain recognizes the threat and invests heavily in both defensive and offensive cyber capabilities. The trigger is political will. A near-miss attack focuses government attention. Defense budgets increase. Cyber command expands. Britain develops doctrine for offensive operations. The government makes clear that cyber attacks on British critical infrastructure will be met with proportionate retaliation, not just cyber responses. Economic, diplomatic, and potentially kinetic consequences. Britain demonstrates capability by conducting limited operations against adversary systems. Not destructive attacks, but sufficient to signal credibility. Simultaneously, Britain hardens defences. Critical infrastructure is isolated from general internet connectivity. Backup systems are improved. Supply chains are secured. Training and recruitment expand cybersecurity workforce. International partnerships deepen. Britain coordinates defensive and offensive operations with allies. The outcome is stabilization. Adversaries recognize that attacking Britain carries unacceptable costs. The frequency of sophisticated attacks decreases. Low-level probing continues, but major operations stop. Britain maintains constant vigilance and continues investing in capability. Who wins? Britain. Allied democracies. The international rules-based order. Who loses? Authoritarian states lose asymmetric advantage. Criminal groups lose easy targets. The indicators to watch are government policy announcements, budget allocations, and demonstrated offensive capability. So the core issue is this. Britain's biggest strategic threat isn't visible. It's not tanks or missiles. It's the invisible war being waged against the systems we depend on every day. And most people don't know it's happening. They turn on lights, use water, access banking, and assume it will always work. That assumption is being tested every single day by adversaries who understand Britain's vulnerabilities better than most Britons do. I'm analysing all three scenarios, and the first is already unfolding. We're experiencing escalating attacks, we're defending reactively, we're not imposing sufficient costs. The second scenario remains possible. A major failure could happen at any time. The third scenario requires political will. We haven't yet demonstrated. The system does not collapse overnight. It erodes, one attack, one disruption, one failure at a time. Britain still has capable intelligence agencies, skilled cyber defenders, and advanced technology, but we're fighting a defensive war against adversaries who hold the initiative. That needs to change. Deterrence requires the credible threat of offensive action. Defense alone is endurance, not victory. And Britain cannot afford to simply endure. We must impose costs, establish red lines, and demonstrate that attacking British systems carries consequences too severe to justify. The choices are hard, but the alternative is unacceptable.